Well, good evening, everyone. We are so excited that you are here this evening with us. You all are in for a real treat, I promise. My name is Brandy Foss, and I'm so excited to introduce to you our speaker this evening. It's no other than Jamie Kinsey, who is an occupational therapist, a precision nutrition certified coach, and a wellness educator dedicated to helping people take a proactive, sustainable approach to their health. Jamie is a wife and a mom of three teenagers who understands firsthand the realities of balancing family, career, and personal wellness in today's fast paced world. Through her work as an occupational therapist, she helps individuals understand how daily habits, environment, and lifestyle choices influence long term function, resilience, and overall quality of life. For more than 2 decades, Jamie has been deeply involved in the wellness space, focusing on nutrition, prevention, and simplifying health in a world filled with overwhelming and often conflicting information. She partners with the Juice Plus Company, where she educates and supports individuals and families in building practical nutrition first strategies that align with real life. Jamie is known for her ability to take complex science and translate it into relatable, actionable, actionable insights that empower people to work with their biology rather than against it. So please join me in welcoming Jamie Kinsey as she presents Fix Your Gut, Transform Your Life.
Yay. Can you see my screen? Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. Obviously, you've taken your Thursday night because this topic is speaking to you in some capacity for some reason, and maybe it's for yourself and maybe it's for a loved one. I have a personal journey with it that you're going to hear a little bit, not only myself, but in my family. And I think that, yeah, I think that life is just had me kept taking steps to get me to be here with you guys today. So I do come at this from an occupational therapy lens. And if you guys don't know what occupational therapy or therapists do, is we like to get people to function and it's maybe somebody wasn't born with function or maybe they've lost it. And then we work to try to help to get that function back, usually around what we call activities of daily living. And so nutrition has been a huge piece for me for the last 23 years to help people to really better understand and be empowered of how they can take control. So when it comes to why I'm here telling you guys about the gut tonight, it's because if I have to help simplify this entire complex system that you carry around every single day, I want to make it as simple as possible for you. It really is narrowing on the gut. And so I hope you guys walk away understanding why you may want to make that your primary focus for your health. So this is how I got here. The picture on the left is I was 11 months old, and I'll point to the medicine bottles up in the upper left-hand corner. So when I was 11 months, I had pneumonia so bad I had to be hospitalized and put in an oxygen tent. And my mom retells the story that it was so severe that what they were doing wasn't working, and that they said, if she doesn't get better, we're going to have to trach her. And thankfully, I didn't end up needing a trach. But what helped to open up my airways was a large dose of antibiotics and steroids. So that little person, right when we're born, we're actually not born with a gut microbiome. And so in its infancy itself, it completely got wiped out. And studies show that when you wipe out a developing microbiome, it leads to a lot of other sensitivities and vulnerabilities down the line. So I grew up allergic to eating poultry, like I couldn't eat chicken or turkey. I was allergic to eating eggs early on. I remember having to get an enema before I was school age. So I definitely had some GI issues. I was allergic to animals. And then when I became active, I had exercise-induced asthma. So we kind of teased if it was if it was alive, I was allergic to it. So I grew up on a lot of medications, especially spring and fall were really challenging times for my airways. And my mom used to say, or she still says, and she doesn't mean ill will by it, but as a little person, I took on this. She used to say fall was her favorite time of year until I was born. So Emotionally, I've taken on that I was a burden. And so today I function that I really never want to be a burden for people in any capacity. But at 25 years old, I was on 8 prescription medications, and I did find myself down the medical path as an occupational therapist. And then Brandy mentioned in my bio, yes, I became precision nutrition certified. I got my massage therapy license. I got my CrossFit certification. I have like amassed all of this knowledge and skills, and I forever will be somebody who learns. And it's because I am passionate about helping people avoid the pain that I walked through as a little person, knowing what it's like to not be able to breathe and just to struggle and be a little bit miserable. Now, I will say, I think the strengths that came from it is I'm a really resilient person because I didn't know life any differently. But I do know the stress that that put on my mom. I was the middle of 5 kids, and having one who's sick quite often is a burden, and not to mention the medical costs. So I want to help moms to prevent this in their kids, but I also want to prevent parents from having to go through the stress of having a chronically sick little one. So these are the facts. So we have to start with the bad news, and it is the sorry state of American health. Unfortunately, we have adapted this as normal, and we just think it's part of part of being a human being. And honestly, I want to tell you it's not. We're not supposed to be having these disease processes that are so rampant today. So 3 out of 5 Americans will die from chronic inflammatory disease, such as heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes. And what you'll see on this particular slide is all of these are linked to inflammation. Chronic inflammation is linked to more than 130 health conditions. Around 60% of Americans live with at least one chronic disease. Approximately 10% of Americans have autoimmune diseases, and about 1 in 3 Americans have allergic conditions. And let's talk about metabolic health. Metabolic health is not just about, obesity, although you can see here roughly 75% of adults are overweight or obese. Metabolic health, metabolism, is how we use energy. It's how we utilize it and it's how we store it. So it has to do with our hormones and our blood sugars. And so metabolic dysfunction is strongly associated with that systemic inflammation. And I added this since the last time I chatted with you all, but the next generation is worse off. Nearly half of the US children have a chronic health condition. Childhood obesity has reached record levels. And I heard this quote, honestly, when I was in my 20s, and this is the first generation of kids not expected to outlive their parents. And that came from Dr. David Katz, who's head of Yale Preventive Medicine. And when I heard this in my 20s, I did not yet have children. And that's who I thought about. I thought he was talking about my generation of kids. But as I'm 48 years young, I can tell you, I really think that he was speaking to me in my 20s at that time because I can count on more than 2 hands the number of peers that, give or take 4 years of my age have passed away, too early. So I think truly my generation is not expected to outlive our parents, and I feel like it's unfortunately worse off for our children. So I want to empower you guys tonight. And like I started out the calls, I really want you to think about what if the problem isn't that we have so many different health issues, but we keep missing the one system that they all share. And so we are going to dive into the gut microbiome tonight. Typically, when we think about that word, likely you do think gut, but I also want you to know that every part of our body that touches the outside world, so our skin, our nasal passageways, our ear, our oral microbiome, our urinary tract, our reproductive tract, all of those that have an exit or an entrance from the outside, all of those have a microbiome, and it is a protective layer. And the reason, though, when we think about the gut microbiome, actually, let me define it for you. It is the largest ecosystem of microscopic organisms, and now we're specifically talking about the gut that live predominantly in the colon. And they're mostly made up of beneficial bacteria, along with viruses, fungi, and other microorganisms that work together to regulate digestion, immunity, metabolism, and inflammation. So I love just kind of really pointing out that these guys work together. So we need all of them. This is not, I think in years past, decades past, people thought about bacteria and they thought they were all bad and we wanted to wipe them all out. But the reality is that there are more microbes, there are more bacteria than there are human cells. So there are more of them than there are us, and we need to learn to work together. They don't want their host to die. So we really want to have a really abundant microbiome. Okay. So when I think about why is the largest part of our microbiome, consolidated here in the colon? Dr. Will Bolshewitz, he is a gastroenterologist. He's written several books, but his brand newest one, if you're somebody who has any kind of GI challenges, I'm going to encourage you follow him on his socials. But his newest book is called Plant Powered Plus, and he really dives into, some of the things I'm going to speak with you guys today about. But even being in the medical profession, I had never heard it this way. And he said, when we think about our defense system, we typically only think about the immune system. And he said the reality is that's the third layer of defense. The first layer actually is this microbiome, or sorry, the bacteria. So we want to have as many as many of them as possible, and they all have different kinds and they play different roles. So we want to have an abundance. The second layer is this one-celled wall. So the reason that most of these guys are here is because of all of the surfaces that touch the outside world. This is the most vulnerable because it was only one cell. And so when these guys get weakened and wiped out, and that mucosal layer goes with it, now this opens up and it starts to let things cross this barrier. And now our immune system is being, asked to be turned on. So we have an innate immune system and an adaptive immune system. And the innate immune system is you get a cut, it gets red, it gets hot, it gets swollen. That is normal. And so there is a level of inflammation that we do want. It's just how our bodies were made. The problem is when we let too much cross this barrier, now our adaptive immune system is kicking in and we are demanding that it stays on at all times and it never gets a break. And so we stay in this low grade inflammation because, and we'll talk about some other things in a little bit, but I had hip replacement surgery two Decembers ago. And so I had to get put on antibiotics and I had to take some pain medications to make it through that process. So I wiped out these guys. And then I was demanding of my immune system. I had like inflammatory issues that happened after my surgery. And so what happens from that point is going to vary person to person because our gut is connected to, I would say, almost every other organ system there is. But you guys can see in this picture, your gut has a connection to all of these different places. And so you could, how inflammation over time shows up for me might look different for how inflammation over time shows up for you, but it is all connected to this one single system. So here are some common signs of an unhealthy gut, right? Headache, mood swings, anxiousness, unable to focus, brain fog, congestion, women's hormones issues. So, perimenopause, menopause, could be fertility and pregnancy challenges could have a relationship here. Nausea, erectile dysfunction, skin issues, poor metabolism, bloating, allergies, food sensitivities, getting sick frequently, constipation, loose stools, heartburn. And the number one symptom of an unhealthy gut is just fatigue, just feeling tired a lot. And why is this happening to us? Like what are compromising those microbes in that mucosal layer, opening up that cell wall? Well, honestly, it is a perfect time of our perfect storm of our culture right now. We do live in a highly processed food world, and there is a sugar dominance, and sugar weakens the gut barrier. So I want you to hear that because I like my sweets too, but it is really wise to really limit the amount, especially of added sugar that you're taking in. Honestly, the World Health Organization says we shouldn't have more than 25 grams of added sugar daily. So less is more there. Low plant diversity. We're just not, we typically kind of stay in our box of what we do eat when it comes to actual plants. And we're definitely deficient in fiber. We are taking frequent antibiotics, and there's a lot of people who I see still today as an occupational therapist that get stuck in this medication cycle just because that's how they were raised, to pop an ibuprofen for this, or Tylenol for that. And those medications, they wipe out those microbes and it leaves us at risk of further complications. We have over sanitized environments, chronic stress, poor sleep, reduced time outdoors, sedentary lifestyles, chemical exposures. We have low fermented food intake, C-section births, and reduced breastfeeding. So even since COVID, it's gotten a lot worse. Our lifestyles, let's say like 50 years ago, were far more designed for us to be outdoors more, to be in social gatherings, shoulder to shoulder and eyeball to eyeball more, for us to be in nature, to plant gardens, to be in the soil. We worked hard and we slept good at night. We had that natural light exposure, not these, sterile LED lights that actually aren't really good for us. So there is a lot, not to mention the plastics. If we can avoid our plastic intake, plastics help to wipe out that as well and affect our hormones. So here's another way, if you're curious, like, is my gut okay? We're gonna go here. I know my younger two kids, when I show them this chart called the Bristol Stool Scale, they're just like, ew, mom, like, no, I don't want to talk about it. But I think it's important to talk about it. It's important to teach your kids what normal is. I think it's important to teach your spouse what normal is. So types 3 and 4 are what we're aiming for. That's when you know that you're actually in a pretty good rhythm with your bowel habits. Type 1 and 2, it kind of speaks to you being a little bit more dehydrated, maybe some nervousness or anxiousness, nervous system things going on. If you're 5, 6, 7, it also could be that you're not getting enough fiber. And also maybe there's some anxiousness, some nervous system things that are going on. And it's important to note, we often hear that, babies and elderly are our most vulnerable populations. And I think this plays a huge part in that. And it's because we're not born, like I was not born as a baby with a microbiome, but when I pass through mom's birth canal, I get to start picking up mom's probiotics. And then when I breastfeed, I get to start getting prebiotics. And so I get to start developing my microbiome, but we're more vulnerable as babies. I was almost neurotic with my kids as far as keeping them healthy. And I remember early on thinking, why are they getting runny noses? And it's because they didn't have a microbiome yet to protect their little immune systems. They were still developing. And then the elderly, like as we age, we lose our muscle mass and we have to be more conscientious of building muscle because it's our longevity organ. The same thing is true here with our microbes, is that they start to, if we're not intentional, they start to fade out as we get older. So it's important that we prioritize and focus on building this microbiome. And so there's lots of different, I mean, we could do a really long talk tonight on all the different ways that we can improve this, the good bacteria and the lining. But I'm going to touch and give you a couple tips tonight. Let's start with movement. One of the best things that you can do is first thing in the morning when you wake up. It actually, the best way to have a good night's sleep is to get light, sunlight, natural sunlight. It's okay if it's the sky is covered with clouds, but if you can get sunlight on your eyes before 10 a.m. where you live for like 10 minutes, and even better if you go for a walk to get that sunlight on your eyes, that's going to help to wake up those bacteria and help what they call a circadian rhythm. But it lets the bacteria know like it's time to wake up and it's just time to start prepping to, digest food. So you got movement and sunlight kind of right there together, but also like more intentional exercise also increases the amount of what's called a postbiotic that helps to heal that gut lining. Nervous system regulation. This one is really sneaky and it's easy to overlook, but when our nervous system isn't regulated, then we have a compromised gut. And a lot of times people get stomach aches, right? When they have emotions or feelings. The nervous system is the very first system in utero to develop. And I think that's fascinating. So some tips to help to like calm down that nervous system. And when is it important to do that? Because sometimes it's important to be in the sympathetic system, but an important time to be in your parasympathetic system is before meals and before bed. And so if you can just be more intentional and just start to take some slow, deep breaths, maybe even put your hand on your heart and the other hand on your belly, but just take some like 4 slow, deep breaths before you eat a meal. It's going to help you to better be able to break down those foods, let your body know it's safe, and then you're going to digest it better and your body will utilize it better. And the same thing before bed. We want to calm down that nervous system. Meditation is great for this. There's a lot of fun tips or tricks tricks when it comes to that, but I'll end there. But nutrition, we're going to lean into nutrition because I feel like it's the biggest lever we have to make the biggest difference. So these are called the four workhorse nutrients. Again, this is coined by Dr. Will Bulshewitz, and he talks about of the eating lifestyles that have been shown to increase longevity and optimize health, there really isn't a one size fits all diet. You have vegan and vegetarians and pescatarians and paleo, right? All of those different diets that have proven benefit, they all have this in common that they have these four workhorse nutrients. And that's why we're going to lean into them tonight. And the first one is fiber. Fiber is what helps with motility and it helps to bulk things up. And fiber also, as you're going to learn in a second, becomes food for the bacteria. And the goal is to eat 25 grams for women a day minimum and 38 grams for men minimum. And for kids, whatever their age is, plus 4 grams is what your target could be. And feel free to take a picture or a screenshot. These are just some easy examples that I put on this particular slide. But if you have dove into the world of AI and things like Chat GPT, I encourage you to let it know that you want to try to eat more of these things and ask it to help you go shopping. And it will help you to do that. And you can let it know what you like and what you don't like. The next category are polyphenols. And truly, this is the color of what makes fruits and vegetables colorful. And the largest gut study ever done was, back done in, I think, 2018. And they showed that those who had a variety of 30 different plants in a week had the most diversity in their gut microbiome of that bacteria versus people who just had a variety of 10. So we really want to aim for variety and that variety consistently. And so I do want to give you some tips for this because we've done different challenges where we've tracked fiber. We've done challenges where we've tracked the amount of plants we eat in a week. And when I track it and I have a group of people doing it with me, I usually can nail the targets. But it's when that challenge stops and I kind of go back to my previous eating lifestyle that I start to fall a little bit short. But I find if I focus on salads, soups, smoothies, stews, those are really great ways to throw in a lots of herbs and fruits and veggies so that you can hit this target of 30 different plants in a week. And typically we'll say like a serving of fruits and vegetables is about the size of your fist, which is true. But also know like nuts and seeds, that serving is far smaller. And if you start to get into spices and herbs, that's even tinier. But all of those different plants matter and they count. So that's how it's really easy to get a lot more if you start eating some of those things and adding them in. I know people who were throwing in chia seed to their yogurt, just a tablespoon, and it was really helping them to hit their fiber goal a couple weeks ago. When next category is healthy fats, so we need to be getting about 2 to 4 servings a day. So things like fish, and I like wild caught salmon, but I typically am not a big fish maker in my own house. So you can get it from other sources like avocado and extra virgin olive oil, from nuts and seeds. And then we have fermented foods. And this is popular in a lot of other cultures, but unfortunately, here in the United States, we are falling far short. So aim to get 3 to 6 servings daily. Again, the largest study so far done on fermented foods was done at Stanford, and it showed those who had 6 servings daily had the most diversity and the least amount of that inflammation that we were talking about affecting the immune system. 6 can be challenging. But a lot of that in that study I do know came from yogurt. And so just one little tip though is when you are getting these foods, especially the fermented foods, you want to make sure to read that label and you want to make sure you see words like lactobacillus. Like you want to see the bacteria names on there, especially the yogurts, because sometimes those yogurts are full with sugar and they don't have the fermented part in it, the bacteria. So now you guys know. And the OT and me, like I want to give people like where's the target? Where are we going? What's our end goal? And that's what I just gave you as the end goal. But the reality is that I know that people behaviorally still fall far short, myself included. So the data is about only 1 in 10 Americans are meeting our vegetable intake. Only about 12% are meeting the fruit intake, and I like fruit. Around 95% of Americans are fiber deficient. We've touched on that, and that's terrible. And fermented foods are rarely consumed regularly in the modern Midwestern or Western diet. So we're going to talk about prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics. I used to think that they were all the same things. And now I'm going to teach you guys what they are so that you can be better empowered. But the prebiotics are the fiber and those polyphenols that we just mentioned. So there are two categories of prebiotics, fiber, polyphenols. And they are the food, right? That's the fuel. So think of them like that. They're the food. And then the probiotics are all of those live microorganisms, both innate, which just means there are naturally occurring ones that you already have inside of your system. And then we have ones we introduce with fermented foods or potentially supplements. And so those bacteria eat the prebiotics. And when they eat the prebiotics, they produce what is known as a postbiotic. And postbiotics are beneficial metabolites that are called short chain fatty acids, and they provide a whole bunch of health benefits. And so those short chain fatty acids are known as butyrate, propionate, and acetate. Butyrate's kind of the king with short chain fatty acids. That one is really clinically shown to help to heal that gut lining, that cell wall. So we want a lot of it. So rightly so, a lot of people turn to gut health products and supplements. I'm one of them because I knew that I had a gap. It's a highly competitive market. 88% of what exists today on the market are probiotics. And unfortunately, two-thirds of people have had no noticeable benefit from taking their probiotic. Again, when I had my hip surgery 2 Decembers ago, I did take a probiotic, and actually the one I took was Seed, and I really liked, their marketing. I liked what they had to say about the science. I liked that they were really proud that their capsule got to the end location. But I noticed no difference at all in taking that particular product. I just was like checking a box that I knew that I needed to take a probiotic. So I don't know if you guys can relate that you've taken these things because you know you needed to, but you don't really know if it had a benefit or not. Well, if you were like me, the reason that you might have had that experience is because most probiotics are such fragile nutrients, they don't survive the hydrochloric acid of the stomach. And so they don't ever make it to the lower intestine where we need them to get for them to do their job. But the other reason that they don't work, kind of like the one I took, maybe does get to the lower intestine, but now you don't have prebiotics there to feed it. You don't have the fiber and the polyphenols there for to like maybe it'll sprout a little bit, but most of the time it ends up dying off and not doing its job because the environment wasn't primed for it to thrive. And so as Brandy mentioned, I am partnered with the Juice Plus company. I actually recommend several different products to my clients. I love doing the research and finding good things for my family, actually, typically most first and foremost. But when I find good things, I want to be that trusted source that you know that I did the homework and that I'm dangerous enough to understand a lot of the medical world. I am not a doctor, but I do know a lot. And so I hopefully can be that trusted source. So I am affiliated with the Juice Plus company, and they knew that this market needed to be disrupted. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. So 23 years ago this month, I had started taking these fruit and veggie capsules from this company. Just from a coworker who had recommended it to me. I was on 8 prescription medications, mostly asthma and allergy related, as you heard me share earlier. Um, and what happened for me is just taking these fruits and vegetables was that my gut started to be improved. And now we know because of the polyphenols, right? All these different colors of fruits and veggies that are in these plant powders were actually getting into my bloodstream and they were starting to have an improvement of lowering my inflammation and helping my immune system. I was having less allergic reactions. And the longer I was on it, the more benefits I saw. The berry blend came out several years after I was a partner, available to me. And then this is a algae-based omega. So we talked about healthy fats, and I took omegas definitely through all my pregnancies. But what I didn't know is that the fish oil I was taking, fish don't actually make omegas. Fish get their omegas from the seaweed and the algae that they eat. So they're just passing it along to us via the food chain. So our company has bypassed the fish and went straight to the source to get the algae. And algae really is the highest quality omega source that you can get. You're not just getting omega 3, you're getting a full spectrum. You're getting the full plant source of the omega. And our clinical studies on that show that it gets into your system in half the time as conventional omegas with half the dose. And it spikes that omega index in your bloodstream, which is heart protective. So now we've got the healthy fat and we've got these polyphenols, all those different plant colors. Because when I was 25, I knew I wasn't eating what I was supposed to be eating. And even now today, like I am intentional. We do eat clean, but sometimes I just fall short of getting what I need to. I'm sorry, I don't know who's marking up the screen, Brandy. I don't know if you can take that off, but so this is the superfood powder. It just celebrated a year anniversary, and the company knows that sometimes people get tired of taking pills. And so they put the fruit veggie berry capsules into a drink format. And my kids have been on Juice Plus their entire life. And my 17-year-old says, Mom, I actually look forward to taking my Juice Plus every day now when this came out a year ago. So if you're somebody who would rather drink it in a really tasty format, this is a game changer. And then Luminate came out, and this is more polyphenols. This is in the mushroom and herb category. So it is expanding the plants that my system has been getting. Again, showing up in different ways with benefits for your gut microbiome. But this one has even more that gut-brain connection. This is the first of the products that Juice Plus came out with that you actually feel different in about 30 to 60 minutes. It gives you a clean energy. It helps you to focus, improve your mood. Yeah, I know all the moms swear by this. And here are the clinical studies that stand behind Juice Plus. So I'm not just sharing my story and relying on a testimony. They have over 50 clinical studies showing that Juice Plus gets in your bloodstream. And when it gets in your bloodstream, it's proven to do all of these things. Now, I showed you that organ system connection earlier with the gut. And it's pretty much every organ system that you see right here that has been proven to be benefited by Juice Plus, which I think is pretty cool. And then this superhero came out this last September, and we're really going to lean into talking about it tonight because I have had such a personal story with it. But what it is an innovative, unique two-step system. So step one are that capsule bottle. That's the probiotic, and they're tiny capsules, but it is a blend of 9 different probiotics. And if you are into health like I am, feel free to take a picture and ask ChatGPT or Grok, like what clinical studies have been shown on these strains of bacteria? Like what benefit do they have? Dr. Bill Sears, I loved when he saw this particular slide. He is a world-renowned pediatrician. He's delivered so many babies. And when he looked at this, he said, you know what I was most impressed about? He's like, when I saw these, they were so familiar to me because these are the same bacteria that mom produces and passes along to the baby in birth. And he's like, so if mom makes it, it's the best. And so I love that. And then you have these prebiotics. So this is a blend of 6 different prebiotic fibers. So Juice Plus has again always had the polyphenols, but they've been missing the probiotic and they've been missing the fiber until now. And so these are fibers that most of us are not eating on a daily consistent basis. And I actually love eating artichokes. It is the vegetable I'd ask my mom to cook for me on my birthday, but I got it once a year. So now I'm able to get some of the fiber from Jerusalem artichoke, from things like chicory root and acacia fiber on a daily basis. And I think it's important to understand here that not all fibers feed all probiotics. There's actually a matching system. And so when you are taking these two, they've been very intentionally designed to match up to produce specific postbiotics, right? That butyrate, propionate, and acetate we talked about earlier. So postbiotics help with epithelial barrier function, that gut integrity, and the mucosal system. It helps immunity, reduced inflammation, cognitive mood and appetite control. And I know that there are so many people who are benefiting right now from things like GLP-1s. And I do believe that they have their time and their place. But that's not something that I believe somebody should be on for their entire life. I think we need to help teach people skills to be able to maintain the benefits that they're having. And so propionate, one of those postbiotics, is associated with glucose regulation, so helping to stabilize that blood sugar, and with weight management. It helps to produce your own natural GLP-1s. So this is where it got really personal for me. I have been into gut health for the last 3 to 5 years, and the company was rolling out this product, and they had asked me to train on conference about it. And I think, I don't think, I know God knew what he was doing when they asked, for whatever reason, they asked me. But it was the fact that last May, we're coming up on a year here soon. My 18-year-old was graduating high school and getting ready to go off to college. And I take my kids once a year to a dermatologist for just a well visit to have, their skin checked. And Owen got recommended or got prescribed an antibiotic for a little bit of back acne that he had. And within a week of taking that antibiotic, he had completely bloody stools. And I paid out of pocket for a functional medicine doctor that's a good friend. And I thought Doc could get Owen fixed in the next 3 months before we got him to school for sure. So Owen went through lots of blood tests and stool tests. And every test that the doc was running just kept coming back negative. And so we had a general practitioner that I was getting ready to set Owen up just so that we had this other GP as in our insurance plan that he could fall back on when he was at college. And thankfully, that GP also did colonoscopies. And he said, Jamie, if that test comes back negative, we're going to have to get Owen a colonoscopy. And ultimately, we did. I did take Owen to Chinese medicine as well. Like when your kid is sick and when they are not thriving, when they are actually going the opposite way, like you will throw any amount of money for them to be well. So I was paying for Owen to have bi-weekly acupuncture and getting Chinese herbs in addition to the functional med doc, the general med doc. And when that colonoscopy came back, it was 3 days before he was headed off to college and he got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And so, if you don't know what Crohn's is a bowel disease, but if left untreated, that can lead to having to have some of your colon resectioned and having to, poop into a bag on your body. Like it could be really bad, and for some people, it really is. And I just was committed to trying to stay on top of Owen as best I could and get it all turned around. So that antibiotic wiped out his microbiome and triggered a genetic predisposition that Owen has. And it causes urgency and frequency. He lost 30 pounds this summer. He spent most of his time on the toilet instead of hanging out with his friends before he went to college. And unfortunately, part of the problem was the urgency like causes them to have accidents. And so that was part of what he was experiencing as an 18-year-old young man. And he was about to be roommates with 3 other boys and share one bathroom. Which again, it just really was stressful for him and stressful for me. So Juice Plus was so kind. They knew this was going on. We did put Owen on a biologic medication, and it takes about 8 weeks for that to have a build-up effect for it to have any clinical benefit. And so Owen was about in 3 week, 4 week of that biologic. His stools hadn't changed. The acupuncture truly did help his urgency and his frequency. I do want to say it helped. But when he got that super biome, I also had Owen on seed pre and probiotic because I just was checking a box and I was trying to restore what I know was being wiped out. And it didn't hurt him in any capacity, but what I want to say is that we didn't have any improvement with it. But within 5 days of stopping that one and starting super biome, Owen went from having completely water stools to completely normal stools on that Bristol stool scale. And so this is him, just like a couple months into college, just feeling back to himself. He put his weight back on, he put his muscle back on. Actually, this weekend he's coming home from Creighton because he made it to the quarterfinals, the CrossFit Open. So he's competing at a very high level in the CrossFit Open right now. And we did do a follow-up colonoscopy at the end of last year. So 3 months. So from August to December, we did a second colonoscopy and they did a biopsy. And it came back that Owen was in complete remission and that even the biopsy came back negative. They said if we didn't know you had Crohn's, we'd have never been able to tell. So I can't say enough good things. Again, I definitely think his medication had a role to play in all of those things I was doing. And then my personal story with it, as I have mentioned a couple of times, I had hip replacement surgery. So I was carrying more inflammation than I actually realized on my body. Now, I obviously couldn't move as much as I'm used to. I've CrossFitted for about 17 years. And there's been times though where I felt like I'm counting my macros, I'm doing the intense workouts. Why do I feel like it's not physically showing up on my body? The first thing I noticed with Super Biome is I still have an on-off allergy to poultry, to chicken and turkey, and I have to be really, it has to be clean. Like I have to know the source. And so typically I really only eat it in my house because I know where we get it from, and I'm fine. But I was over at a friend's house last summer, and it was a potluck, and I ate some chicken that was there, and I ended up having an anaphylactic reaction. I had to EpiPen myself. And then after that, I ended up having where my gums were swelling, and then I was getting this lining of my mouth was like peeling. And then I got a weird rash on my thigh that I went to urgent care, and of course they wanted to prescribe me an antibiotic, which I said no, thank you. But in 2 weeks of taking Super Biome, because I got it at the same time as Owen, all of those skin things healed up. And then about a month taking the product, I caught myself in the mirror one day, and I'm not showing you this picture to brag, but it really is that like I caught myself by surprise that I could see my abs. Now I always knew that I had abs, but again, I didn't realize the level of inflammation that I had been carrying, that I couldn't see. And why do I think this is happening? Well, I think this is happening because I am better digesting my food. It's breaking down better. I feel like my gut lining is healed. And then so the protein I am doing or eating and the workouts I am doing, like all of those nutrients are able to get to their end location to do what they're meant to do in the first place. So that is my personal story. I have never looked back from all of the Juice Plus product lines, truly. Um, and I just thank you guys for being here. I hope that tonight you learned a little bit about how your body works and some tips and tricks on how you guys can maybe make it a little bit more intentional. And Brandy, thanks for having me. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Jamie, so much for blessing so many of us tonight. Hearing you hearing you share your story never gets old. So we want to thank you for joining us. Um, we want to thank you for showing up and trusting the person who invited you tonight. It's a big deal that you showed up. And they didn't just invite you because they invited you because they care about you. And so, if you want to learn more about the Juice Plus products, please get with the person who invited you this evening and they can share the rest with you. So, thank you again for joining us and wishing you a great weekend ahead. Good night, everybody.